Well, good afternoon, everyone. So glad to have you joining us for this weekly study as we are going through the book of Daniel. And again, I'm humbled and just touched that you are listening, and I pray that God blesses you and gives you just I don't know, a passion, a deeper desire just to learn more about Him. And again, that's the purpose of this study that I truly pray resonates through as we go through these beautiful verses. And so today we're going to be starting. We're in chapter 3 of Daniel, picking up with verse 14, and uh, some of this just astounds me. We start off with Nebuchadnezzar spoke unto them. Remember, the three Hebrew children are there: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Daniel's involved. We don't know of anybody else involved in this, although there had to be others. They all of them were carried captive. Where is everybody? Why do we only hear about four? Um, and then even in today's session, um, we're going to see some things that make me wonder just how did they live in this culture? How were they, in what ways assimilated, and in what ways did they retain their, um, religious identity, their ethnic national identity? And I think there's, deeper meaning in this that I'm still trying to search out. So we see Nebuchadnezzar is speaking to these Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego because, of course, he made up this golden image. He's commanding them to bow down and worship it. When the music sounds, everybody's supposed to flop to the ground and show obeisance to the statue, thereby meaning to Nebuchadnezzar. And of course, these three did not. And we talked last week about, well, where was Daniel? Why wasn't Daniel part of this? But then also, what about everybody else who was there? There were hundreds, if not thousands, of other Hebrew captives that were there, and we don't hear anything about them. So Nebuchadnezzar gets them on the carpet, so to speak, and said, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods, nor worship the image which I have set up?" Obviously, that's a very direct statement, but it caused me to pause and say, well, didn't he know these guys before? He appointed them in the kingdom. He knew Daniel. We know that previously, when Daniel interpreted his dream, the king was all, the God of Daniel is the one true God. And now all of this has changed, and Daniel's not in the picture. But didn't he know what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were all about? Didn't their lives continually display their allegiance and servants to the one true God of Israel? And so he's asking him, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you falling in line? So I sense a disconnect here of wondering how they assimilated, how did they um, conduct themselves in the affairs of the king and in the kingdom, um, to where the king even had to ask this question. So then verse 15, he goes through the whole thing again. When you hear all the sounds, and you fall down and worship, it's going to be good for you. But if you don't worship, you're going to be cast the same hour in the midst of the fiery furnace. And then he says something that's just incredible. Who is the God that shall deliver you out of my hands? It's like, duh, King, where have you been? How much have you changed since the previous chapter? And I guess we don't know how much time has passed. We don't know, is this king got some kind of attention deficit disorder? Is he got some mental illness? Or is this God's hand in this? We know that God does work in the lives of those who he uses for his purpose. We see that. And again, I keep going back to Pharaoh in the Exodus in Egypt, and how God had to wait for the right Pharaoh to come into power so that all of his plan could be fulfilled. I got to raise the question: is this with going on with Nebuchadnezzar? Is this guy, this is unstable, so that he shifts back and forth, and you know one day knows who the one true God is. The next day he's setting himself up as God and forgets all about what happened previously. Um, and is this just using this guy's lack of mental stability to bring about these wonderful miracles that we're going to see and to truly glorify God. I'll let you ponder on that, but obviously we see that he's questioning who is going to deliver you out of my hands. And then verse 16 is really, really, really cool. It says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this manner. This is really weird sentence structure in English. Um, it's causes us to just stop right here. So first we'll look at what the commentators say. We see in verse 16, the Jewish sages say that by um, these children, three men, addressing him as Nebuchadnezzar, rather than King Nebuchadnezzar, they are, it's kind of slighting him. They're implying that they understand that he is a mortal, not a deity. And here that translates, we have no need. And the words are obviously uh, obvious, but we're still missing something. So let's go to our Hebrew or Aramaic, but in the Hebrew Bible Hub. And so this is just uh, begs digging into because the Hebrew is pretty cool here. So he says in verse 16 um, that, and again, follow as we go, and then answered Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and said to the king, No have we need in this manner to answer you. Again, it's very strange. So let's unpack this word that's translated as have need. It's number 2818, and it comes from the word choshek in the Hebrew, which is the word used for darkness. And so they translate it as to be necessary to need, but the definition is to be dark, to grow dim, to be obscure. Um, what a challenge these Bible translators have. But what it does is it gives us an understanding of the darkness that they perceived was going on, but it also is kind of fitting in what may be a Hebrew idiom or a cliche of saying there's no darkness here, basically. And so on the flip side of that, we would say we are clear, or we have the illumination. And we have some um, phrases like this in English where we say, duh, it's clear as a bell or as clear as mud, in the converse. This is somewhat of a phrase like that, that they're using, that there's no darkness here. Is basically what the literal translation is, saying this is as clear as possible to us on what we have to do. We're not vacillating in any way. We don't even have to think about this, which I think is how the King James may read for translation. We don't even have to think about this. This is a no-brainer, on how we're going to answer you. And so that's is pretty cool how that comes about. And then verse 17, it says, even if our God whom we serve is not able to deliver us, or he is able to deliver us, but if not, be it known unto you, O king, that we will not serve your gods, nor worship the golden image that you have set up. Um, Obviously, there's some very interesting things here about worship. And so we're going to look at verse 17. It has the word for worship in it. What is the thought behind this? Um, what's all going on? Obviously, he's commanding them to fall down. He wants them to acknowledge that he is God, not the one true God. But what is this word worship? Here it's translated as serve. So here we have a difference between what we find in the Hebrew Bible, what we find in the King James, and what we find the actual word is palchin. So unpacking this, it means to worship, but look at the similarity or the root of where it comes from the word to serve and to labor. And I find it very interesting, and it brings us into a cultural and historical background showing that in the context of where they were living, service and worship were closely intertwined. This is somewhat different than maybe we understand in our Midwestern culture, where we will throw the terms around believe or to think or to have a mental understanding of something. In the Hebrew culture, these terms were not so I'll say strongly used or understood in the same way. They felt that action was the clear um, demonstration, if you will, of what you were feeling inside. And so to them, just having a thought, having a belief, if that thought did not follow up with service, did not follow up with action, if there was not some physical labor or action or servitude connected with it, they had no understanding of what that was. It meant nothing to them. And so this is where we find that cultural difference. And I have to reapply that in my life many times, thinking, okay, I may believe something, but if my belief does not influence my actions, is my belief really worth anything? Only when it will guide my behavior and govern my choices and my decisions, maybe that's the only time it's really of any consequence in my life, that it's really takes it beyond just mentally asserting something, mentally understanding something, and applying it in a way to where it truly governs my life, and that I will base my actions upon this belief. And so I thought that was really interesting to see something new to Bible Hub. They've added this cultural and historical background of these words, and I found that quite enriching here today. So, continuing on, that understanding of what worship was in the servitude, and we get to verse 17. We know our God is able to deliver us, and he will deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. Notice they had some faith here, and obviously their faith is being stood upon or acted upon by them standing in the face of this king who virtually held their life in his hands. And I would love to have seen what their faces look like. The Jewish sages are very quick to say that, okay, they weren't in your face, or they weren't thumbing their nose at him. They weren't defiant in a unrespectful way, but they were standing their ground. They were standing for what they believed was the greater good. It was what their conscience was leading them, their belief system was leading them to do, and they were able to stand. And I think about where we are in our society and in the world today, and looking at all the unrest and the troubles that are going on, and sometimes we have heard things about Bible prophecy. We know that things aren't going to get better. We know that the end times are upon us, and we know there's Bible prophecies out there that say that we may very well uh, be persecuted for our beliefs someday. We may even, some of us have to give our lives for our beliefs. And so we see this almost a repetition here of what we see in Daniel, of what do we do in the midst of our society? How do we live in a foreign society like they lived in Babylon, but yet retain our beliefs, retain the integrity, and live as we feel God's word desires us to live, but yet contribute to society, not be an outcast. Obviously, they were functioning, they were contributing, they were making the society better by being there. But yet, when it came to this aspect of it, is when they stood their ground. And I just think, Lord, as time comes and as society goes the way it's foretold, please give me the strength. Please give me that type of backbone, that type of fortitude to be able to be like these three Hebrew children, that if I'm in a situation, no matter if my life depends upon it, I will not compromise my integrity for your sake, that I will stand. And whether you deliver me or whether you not deliver me, we're going to stand for you. And so I just am really moved by this verse here. And just I don't know, something that's I'm going to ponder, and I'm going to include in my prayers that God would help me to learn what I need to learn from this. And of course, as you can imagine, King Nebuchadnezzar didn't say, "Oh, yeah, I really respect your opinions. I'm so glad you stood up for your beliefs. Oh, just we'll give you a free pass here." Not at all. King Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury. The form of his visage was changed, smoke coming out of his ears, face turning all red. Who knows? All the cartoons we think of when anger is truly portrayed. And so, again, we got to take a look at the Aramaic here in verse 19, and we see that this word for fury is chema, which is the same word that we unpacked last week when the king got all up in air, and it comes from the word rage. But chema is a word that has to do with heat, with just building up the temperature, blowing a gasket, all of those type of words that we use so often to describe. And so he was full of fury. I find it interesting that um, in English it's translated the expression on his face was changed, but you'll see these words here in brackets and in parentheses, which means that there were words here that were not known to them. And so they had to substitute with a word that was known in the common Aramaic vernacular. And so that word is changed here. And I find that really interesting just to see it was altered. And it talks about a shift or a change in a state of condition. And again, the cultural background of how change was significant, but I just find this interesting what this king, how I don't know, off his rocker he was, if you will, and how easily he was set off to just blow a gasket. And, he was just raging with fury and said, "Let's heat this furnace 7 times hotter than it was supposed to be heated before." He commanded certain mighty men that were in his army to take Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and cast them into this furnace. And then verse 21 is interesting. It says, "These men were bound in their cloaks, their tunics, and their robes, and other garments, and thrown into the fire um, in the midst of a burning fiery furnace." I have no answer to this, but it strikes me as why was it necessary to know what they were wearing? This sentence could have just said, "We threw them in." Why was it necessary to know that they were wearing cloaks and tunics and robes and all these other garments? I think maybe we'll see that as we get to the finishing, when we finish the story later on, and see that there's some importance for us to know what they were wearing. And the same thing with the furnace. Okay, we understand what a furnace is, but it's a burning, fiery furnace. Why the necessary adjectives? Wouldn't the furnace already be burning? Wouldn't fiery be part of burning? I just find this interesting. Why the extra descriptions? What was it supposed to tell us? Maybe as I'm saying this, it'll strike a chord with you. Maybe you'll have something that will come to your mind. Maybe it's for the emphasis. Obviously the furnace was 7 times hotter. Okay, they didn't have thermometers. How did they measure 7 times? Is this just a metaphor for completeness, that it was as hot as possible? We see the word seven being one of those Bible numbers that's used so often through the scripture. 7 days fulfills one week. Um, uh, there were just many things tied in with seven to show completeness. So maybe they were telling us that this furnace couldn't be heated any hotter than what it was. It was at its maximum limit because you couldn't measure seven times. There was nothing to measure it. So again, very interesting verbiage helps us have an insight into the culture and what they've thought about things and how they measured things and what was important to them. And so we're going to stop here at verse 21. Obviously, you're hanging on the edge of your seats here that these guys were just thrown into the burning fiery furnace. And we're going to have to hang on till next week. I hope you get a chance to come back and join us as we look again and pick up the rest of the story. So God bless you all. Hope you found this beneficial, and may God bless you as you ponder all of these beautiful thoughts like I will be this week. Take care. Bye-bye.